Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of OTel Me, an end user Q&A. If you have been to one of these sessions in the past, you might notice that this looks a little bit different and it has a bit of a different name. That's right, we have done some growing up since the last few times, and we're very excited to debut this new look. But don't worry, almost everything else is going to be the same. We have a great interviewee here for you today to learn from. But before I introduce myself and our guest, I would love to know where everyone is connecting from. I am online from Portland, Oregon today, and would love to see where people are from. It looks like someone is here from Brooklyn, New York. So thank you so much for joining out in New York. And so my name is Reese. I am a senior developer relations engineer at New Relic. I also co-lead the End User SIG, which is our cute little logo that you see up in the right corner. And yeah, at the End User SIG, we really focus on connecting directly with end users. And we are dedicated to helping the rest of the SIGs get feedback from end users so they can help improve the project. And to that end, this is one of those events that we host to do that. So we are going to have Ariel on. Ariel, if you would like to join us and introduce yourself.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ariel Valentin. I'm a staff software engineer at GitHub working on observability. Thanks so much, Reese, for inviting me here to chat with you today. It's an absolute honor to be the first in the new format also. So, big shout out to everybody who's done work to try to get this new platform up and running. So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you for being here. I'm really excited. So just to get you and everyone up to speed on the format, it's similar to the ones if you've been on one of these before, but we're going to start with some warm-up questions where we'll kind of massage Ariel into being comfortable, and then we'll hit him with some meaty questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will actually also get into questions more around the OpenTelemetry community, and where he'll have an opportunity to share like feedback about his experiences with contributing, using the project, stuff like that. And then he'll get the chance to ask us questions as well in a little section we call Turn the Tables. And at the very end, if there are any audience questions, actually, scratch that. If you have questions that come up during our conversation, feel free to put them into the chat. If you're watching from YouTube, then just put them in the live chat. And then I think LinkedIn will also have its own chat. So put in your question there and we will get to them as we can throughout the conversation. And then at the end, if you have questions at the end as well, then we will get to those. But yeah, if you have any questions that pop up as Ariel is telling us his story, we definitely want to get to those as they come in. All right. So I think we are good to get started.
Mm-hmm.
So Ariel, you told us a little bit about your role at the company. How did you get started with observability? How did you get started with OpenTelemetry?
Oh, those are great questions. I mean, I should have mentioned that I'm here in Austin, Texas, sunny Austin, Texas. So you know where I am in the world. I think a lot of us started originally, and I don't think my experience is unique, is working with sort of like APM tools, which are vendor proprietary tools, generally speaking, that didn't have distributed tracing in place at that time. And as the community evolved and open tracing became a standard, that was my first experience with working with distributed tracing was the open tracing specification and working and trying out different vendors, different experiences with open tracing. And then by the time that I had gotten to GitHub, I was a champion for distributed tracing because I saw the power that was in there. And around that same time, folks were already moving towards developing and transitioning away from open tracing and open census to OpenTelemetry. So I got really involved very early on in trying to spread the word and learning more, and working with my team, which was the observability team, to start to adopt tracing more, to embrace it more, and to make OTel sort of our North Star. for all of our telemetry signals. I feel like I keep saying the word telemetry over and over again. I'm going to have to
There's going to
find
be
a
a lot of that.
substitute. Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of that. We're both going to stumble over OpenTelemetry at some point or distributed tracing at some point. It's all right. This is a safe space. What okay, so you mentioned you became a champion for distributed tracing. And I think something that's interesting is, we're so ensconced in the world of observability that at least I, tend to presume everyone understands what that is. And it's always surprising to me when someone's like, what's distributed tracing? And they work in
Yeah.
some. So kind of along with that, what do you think that's kind of a main challenge? And I think most organizations face when it comes to observability is not just understanding the value of distributed tracing and
Yeah, because these are all sort of new concepts to folks, right? Folks have their different levels of understanding of the tools that are available to them. And so there's all this vocabulary that you hear that's a little bit hard to parse through. So sometimes it's like, oh, when you say trace, do you mean like a trace log? Log levels at the trace level? When you say trace, do you mean the samples taken from a profiler? When you say, so there's a lot of this sort of language that even though we're converging on a lot of this language, and we have these dictionaries that are defined and published everywhere, there's still sort of like this. There's a hump that we have to get over, or like a challenge that we have with trying to get everybody speaking the same language within the same context, right? Very similar to in domain-driven design, we have these bounded contexts where the same term means a different thing. That flows over into sort of our domain language when it comes to observability and SRE practices. And I'm sure many folks have faced those challenges as well. It's kind of like, let's all get on the same page about what we mean.
Right? Oh, absolutely. What are currently some of the most interesting problems that you are facing in your role?
Oh, well, I mean, one of those things is that transition, right? It's really hard for an organization like us who's been around for a long time. And I say a long time, but whatever it is, 10 years, where the system has grown, evolved, there have been acquisitions that have been brought together. There's disparate kind of backends where we're collecting this data. It's trying to transition from one way of doing things to a new way of doing things, right? So it's learning something new. That's always going to be a big challenge. And folks are trying to do their job every day. They're not trying to learn new SDKs or trying to learn new vocabulary or trying to learn how to be proficient in their backends. What they're trying to do is keep the system up and running and keep our customers happy, right? So I think those are some of the challenges that we all, I know I face, and I'm sure others do, which is making these transitions with the fewest pain points as possible, with like trying to avoid these pain points. And there's so many more. We can go on and on, Reese, but I think right now that's kind of like one of the biggest challenges for adoption. I think overall.
That's actually that's a great segue into the meaty section. So, what was the process like for GitHub to adopt OpenTelemetry?
So for us, it was the role of the advocate, right? So I acted as an advocate and was a champion for OTel at the company, and I specifically was brought in to help advance the mission of tracing, and it was something that I had pitched. And also there were other challenges that we faced too, which was, hey, let's get everybody building a data dictionary. Let's get everybody agreeing to the same language when it comes to what our attributes were going to be, right? Because as you can imagine, as a system evolves or acquisitions or other teams are rolled in, everybody has their own, log attributes or their own metric attributes or whatever it is. And so I said, look, here's a North Star right here. Here's semantic conventions from OTel. Let's anchor onto this and let's follow the rules around semantic conventions so that we can all build up our own internal dictionary. Right, and that comes with its own challenges, right? Schema migrations and trying to keep up to date with the spec and what the instrumentations are doing, right? And as an advocate, it was also a lead on the rollout. So one of the things I wanted to do was sunset all of our old SDKs and move over to our open source SDKs. And myself and a few other members from my team, we all were involved in OTel Ruby, for example, because we're a big Ruby shop, but we got involved in there to help the instrumentations get better and to help test different releases of the SDK and get that rolled out into our GitHub monolith. So we're very, like I said, very early adopters, ran into some challenges and continue to give feedback to the community that way. And I am not only an end user, but like I said, I'm also a maintainer. So I'm playing multiple roles there, trying to help the community along.
Yeah, that's a really interesting position to be in, is as end user and contributor. And I definitely want to circle back on that when we get to the OTel community questions. Tell us about the architecture landscape at GitHub and the telemetry that you're capturing.
Sure. So I've got this little slide that I put together in Mermaid Markdown, so it's not anything official. We can bring that up now so we could take a look at it. And I imagine that for a lot of folks out there who are working with virtual machines where they're running systemd units, or if they're running Kubernetes, we have we have different deployment styles here, but some of our main workloads are running in Kubernetes. And the way that we've got everything set up, you could see here is as part of our Kubernetes cluster, we run our own custom mesh ingress. And on every worker node on the worker nodes, we're running a deployment of the OpenTelemetry collector, which we build using OCB. So we have our own version of the OTel collector that is specific to us. We chose that route because we wanted to ensure that we had the most secure build possible with the minimum number of dependencies. And we also wanted the ability to build our own custom processors so that we can address any issues that we might have that are specific to our needs. Inside of each of these pods, we also have a mesh sidecar. And so ingress traffic is going to come into the OTel collector, OTLP over HTTP. And if you have another application that's running your service, it's shooting over OTLP HTTP traces over to the mesh and sending it to our OTel collectors, which we then from there generate span metrics and sample traces and send those off to a SaaS provider that has where we aggregate all this data. And then on each individual worker, we're running in this hybrid world right now. We're only leveraging OTel for traces and for generating span metric data. We're still living in a world where we're using non-OTel, non-OTLP formats for collecting things like custom metrics, system metrics, and for collecting logs. We have on each one of our worker nodes a metrics agent, and that can speak various different protocols, but mostly it's either using OpenMetrics or it's using statsd to collect data and aggregate it and send it off to the SaaS provider. In addition to that, on all of our worker nodes, we have FluentBit running, and that's what we're using to collect our logs. And all of our logs end up getting streamed out through Azure Event Hubs, which are processed by a bunch of consumers and then sent off to our log store and search system. In addition to that, in addition to these Kubernetes workloads, we have our own virtual machines where we run systemd units. You have to think about, like the Git file system services. Those are all running on systemd, and we have the metrics agent and Fluent running there. We don't yet have the OTel collector deployed there, but that's where we want to get to. We want to get to a world where essentially our entire platform is running an open source software, the OpenTelemetry collector, and we're converging on OTLP for all these formats. So those services are also using StatsD, OpenMetrics, Fluentbit's pulling things out of Journal D because that's where we're streaming all of our logs of the system journals. So and all that stuff again goes right through to the same channels, and it all gets aggregated in these places where we do our work. A little bit about some facts about sort of our trace data is that we've rolled out the OTel SDKs for different programming languages. We have them for Ruby, Golang, JavaScript, Node.js, .NET. We had some experimental Rust usage, but we've had to scale that back. And we had some Java experiments that didn't pan out. We didn't roll those out to production. And a lot of the stuff that we do when we started before any of the automatic instrumentation was available for some of these languages. So we're still deploying them through wrapper libraries. So we maintain a set of wrapper libraries. You install those. It gives you the sort of what we consider to be the minimal defaults that we require for our needs. And we'll do periodic updates of those through Dependabot, right? So it's like as we roll out new versions of those things. I feel like I've said a lot so far, and I don't know, Reese, if you had any follow-up questions for me or.
I actually have so many.
But oh, okay, great.
So you mentioned, and so you mentioned you're leveraging OpenTelemetry for traces right now, and then you talked a little bit about the plans and some of the stuff that you've tried. And I was curious to find out more about, is that mainly because if you're primarily a Ruby shop and, the SDK, maybe the signals for metrics and logs aren't quite as mature yet? Is that the reason, or?
That's one of the reasons. So, one of the other challenges that I didn't discuss when you asked about adoption challenges is, even though OTel says, hey, this is what the signals look like, this is what the semantic attributes are like, there's a lag between the time that something is published or declared in the OTel spec to the time that vendors or open source platforms are able to leverage those things. And there's sort of like this feedback loop as we go through OTEPs and say, hey, we want to try this new thing out. We'll do a couple of things in experimental languages. We'll do this stuff. And, it was a big enough challenge for us to start to roll tracing out that we didn't, and adopting SemCom for logs, that we didn't want to take yet another thing on, which was to say, okay, now we're going to switch over to native OTLP metrics as well. And like you said, some of the SDKs are ahead than others. So with Ruby, we're just recently, with the help of our amazing maintainers, Shuan and Kayla, they've been working diligently to get the metrics SDK up to speed for Ruby. So that's something that wasn't available to us to use. And I think that one of the biggest advantages that I see in tracing is the ability to generate span metrics from traces. It's like, hey, the less things that we have to impose on our users for them to try to figure out how to do, the better for us, right?
And are you using the span metrics connector? Is that what you're using?
We're using a custom connector right now. I'd like to be able to get us to the point where we're using a span metrics connector, but we don't have egress in OTLP right now. We're still doing sort of like vendor proprietary formats for export. Where I want to get to is, that's the strength. One of the biggest strengths of OTel is OTLP, is that standard format that makes things portable for us. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's definitely sort of high on my list of things that I want.
Got you. Okay, so it sounds like the plan is to migrate your other signals over once those reach GA in the languages.
Oh, certainly. And, once I have more time on the calendar too, right? We have so many projects that we have to do as engineers at companies. And it's like, hey, where do we fit these in, right? As you imagine, GitHub is constantly growing every day. We just hit 150 million users. So it's like just an amazing growth of the company. So shout out to all the people at GitHub who've been working so diligently to make this happen,
Yeah.
and so we're here to support. We're here to support that volume growth and support our end users. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. And I also want to mention again, real quick, for those who joined us a little bit later, feel free if you have questions that come up, you want to learn more about something that Ariel has gone over, feel free to pop it into the live chat of whatever platform you're watching from. So whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, go ahead and pop the question in and we will try to get to them throughout the show as we can. So I noticed on your second slide, you mentioned probabilistic sampling. So it sounds like you're not doing any kind of tail sampling.
No, not at the moment. So would you mind bringing that up again, Henrik?
The second slide.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So we started with probabilistic sampling. One of the hard things about tail sampling, as you can imagine, is that the traces all have to go to the same collector in order to make that decision if you're using the collector for tail sampling. So right now we wanted to reduce that burden and complexity immediately. And we started with probabilistic sampling. Some of the things that we want to do in the future is more advanced remote sampling, so that we can have more fine-grained control of what we're looking at. We want to be able to leverage tail sampling rules, but as you know, that's very difficult to implement, a little bit difficult to scale in our case, because we have about 2,000 collectors which are supporting everything right now. Across all of our fleet, right, of like 14,000 hosts or something like that. I'm making that number up off the top of my head. I think that's the last number we had. And we're doing about 26 million spans per second. And just yesterday, during our peak times, we hit our all-time high of 32 million spans per second as we continue to grow our volume. So this is one of the challenges that we've had. And so on my list of all the things that I want to do, tail sampling is definitely on there. You know what I mean? So
Okay. At what point do you think you might get to the point where you could implement tail sampling? Would it be more like maybe side when the processor has been more developed or
I think
further developed?
I don't know how to answer that question because it's on the pile of the list of things that I want to do towards the bottom. So it's like, when can we do it? When I get to all my other wish list items.
Got it. And although I am curious about the other stuff, but that's okay.
That's all right.
I do have
Ask
other
away.
questions that I want to get to as
Yeah, for
well.
sure.
Also, just going back, you mentioned trying some experiments in like Java and Rust that didn't kind of pan out. And I was just curious, what was it that didn't quite work out or that didn't meet your expectations?
Well, we've reduced the number. I'm sorry, all the JVM people out there. We've reduced the number of Java workloads that we're running. So those have been migrated over to different programming languages. So that's one of the reasons why we didn't go through and say, "Oh, let me continue to roll out JVM work." Like it just didn't have the return on investment that we wanted to try. And also, like, we don't have a lot of the same thing was for Rust, is that we have like a very limited set of applications that run Rust, and those are for performance reasons. They ran into some challenges with how it impacted their latency when they introduced the use of the SDK. And I'm going to be honest with you, me not being a Rust expert and being able to get in there and get my hands dirty to try to help out with addressing some of those problems and reporting them upstream, that was something that we had to put on pause. Because again, it's like one program versus all of these other services that are running in Go and Ruby and JavaScript that we need to pay attention to, right? And so that I think that's really where it was, where it's sort of like a critical mass of application services that use these programming languages. It was like, hey, we have to focus our attention on those that are going to get us a higher return on investment for this.
Absolutely. Okay, so what was what was GitHub's observability tool before migrating to OpenTelemetry? I think you mentioned you were using proprietary SDKs.
Yeah, I mean, we used proprietary as SDK for open tracing. So, open tracing was our how we collected traces before. But generally speaking, I think I covered this in the first slide. GitHub is a huge sort of stats metrics user still to this day. And logs are a big part of what we utilize here. So it's like folks are looking at exception stack traces a lot of the times to try to understand where errors are coming from. They're looking at access log streams, and they were trying to piece together, hey, where's the request going and where's it slowing down and this and that. And I showed up with my magic tool distributed tracing. And I'm like, hey, look, here it is on the flame graph or an icicle graph, or here's a waterfall view of this thing. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. And people started looking into that as an additional tool in their toolbox for them to help try to debug things during an incident. So I hope that answers your question there.
Yes. And kind of along those lines, how have things changed since GitHub switched to OpenTelemetry?
So what I'll tell you is that just this year alone, we've seen a dramatic, I wish I had these statistics offhand, but we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of people using tracing and the number of services that have been instrumented. Part of that comes from the fact that I was like, hey, everybody, we're all moving to this new SDK. So everybody install it and let Dependabot go ahead and do these installations on your apps. And people started seeing the value of this investment as well. So they started to use it more. But I want to say that like when we started this adventure, only about 80, and I'm going to use the word services in air quotes, only about 80 services were instrumented. And now we're closer to about 300 of those services, which are effectively like Kubernetes deployment types or like system D types. Because as you imagine, our monolith has, maybe 1,000 services within it. So they're like sub-services in there. But the monolith itself is broken down into like 8 services as like, web UI and API and GraphQL and background workers and stream processors and whatnot. So that's why I put them in air quotes as these are services. But we saw that was quite an increase in the number of services that came in. We were doing something like 5 million spans per second to now we're up to 32 million spans per second. It's just a huge increase in volume and usage.
And along with that volume increase in usage and data volume, how would you say that's impacted how your services are running, how quickly your team is able to debug issues as they arise?
Part of it is an education thing. So a lot of things that, so I mentioned that I'm on the observability team, but really we're 2 groups. One of the groups is called the experience team that works directly with teams. And they operate in a role of sort of like developer relations and advocacy, but also working on, cost control and improving your experience, helping you with identifying new workflows and introduce them into your incident command experience. Those teams set up sessions, education sessions to bring folks on board. But we try to do them not during an incident because that puts them in stress. So what we try to do is like, we'll go into if an incident is happening, it's like, hey, here's some insights that we're gaining and we'll share with you that we're seeing from the traces that you might not be able to see somewhere else. And that has helped in a lot of cases where we couldn't exactly pinpoint what was going on. But then there's also these spots where not every system has been instrumented. So we have to rely a lot on sort of like client metrics or client trace data and say, hey, look, this client is experiencing this problem. Can we take a look deeper at this other service that hasn't yet been instrumented? And so it's been sort of, I'm going to say like this, mixed results. Some teams have like identified issues even before they go out to production, and other teams have been able to leverage it when it's like, oh, this we're having an incident right now. Oh, here's and here's the reason why this is failing. And we've able to do things like identify bottlenecks in like mistakes that, little coding mistakes. Oh, I forgot to act the message before I pulled it out of Kafka. Oh, I'm just retrying that same message millions of times. Or oh, the client timeout doesn't match the server timeout. So the client's timing out and the server is continuing to churn along to try to do this request. So we're identifying things like that we couldn't identify before easily. And so those are some anecdotes.
Oh,
Hope that
no, that's
helps.
awesome. I think I will probably be asking you more about that because I think this is really interesting. Um, one more question from our meaty section. What would prevent you from implementing better telemetry?
What would prevent me from doing that? I think it's because there's so much of the stuff that's in early stages, and we were early adopters on a lot of things, but then there's a lot of stuff that's a lot more risky for us to try to roll out. So for example, one of the things I'm really excited about when I came back from KubeCon is the continuous profiler. I mean, that is one of when you talk about one of the things on my wish list that we'd be able to use today if we could, that's the thing that I would want to do. But because we're still in the early stages of the profiler and the specification, and there's still some churn with the data model, I think that when it comes to the resource intensive or sort of like introspective tools like that, we don't want to take that risk going a little bit too early to adopt those tools, because also there's not a lot of support from our current backends and vendors that will be able to leverage that. It's kind of like we would be experimenting with that to go to nowhere. And so that's kind of, once vendors start to support the OTLP profiling format, data model, I should say, and once the profiler is a little bit more stable, I'd love to jump in there and be able to roll that out a little more widely. I think that a little bit of a bumpy road for us is migrating SemConf from pre 1.0, because we were early adopters of SemConf. So we're at this pre 1.0 stage, and getting ourselves to migrate towards a 1x version of SemConf is another big challenge, because we've already sent all of this data out. It's in our backends. We have to figure out a way to upgrade it, or to say, oh, this is version X. And I kind of, it feels like a lot of the progress was stalled there for the moment. So that I don't know that there's any real solutions available that would say, okay, we can start migrating these schemas over and keep our user experience very high quality. If that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely. I think that is another interesting topic, migrating some semantic conventions. So I might jump back if we have time later, but I do want to get to some of these community questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So one of the big things I think, worked in the community that probably you've seen, I've seen for sure, is people want to contribute to the project, but they're not really sure where to get started. And we have like resources such as, I think in the documentation we added, getting started, and we have, various SIG channels and CNC and Slack. And I think we all have the problem of how do we reach these people, because, there's still something that I don't know. So what was the contribution process for you and your team like to OpenTelemetry?
For us, it was a short process with a lot of observation. So the things that we looked for, myself and my teammates at the time, when we approached the community, we were looking at code of conduct. What were the expectations of the code of conduct? We went through and actually looked at issues, previous PRs, the feedback that was in those PRs to see if the behaviors expected in the code of conduct were reflected in the PRs and in the issues. Because there's nothing worse than you wanting to be part of this community and finding that those two things don't match. And to see that that happened, then we participated in the SIGs, which was very nice for us to be able and convenient for us in the US because the Ruby SIG was in the US hours. We joined those meetings during the day and started to provide some feedback as end users and say, hey, look, we ran into this challenge. If we identified something that was a challenge for us, we could contribute a PR. And the maintainers were very generous with their time, did their reviews, and we were able to get a couple of custom propagators merged. We got some instrumentations merged. We identified other gaps for the instrumentations that we use, because one of the biggest challenges, I think, as a maintainer is there's so much that you have to do, right? You've got the SDK, you've got the API, you've got documentation to do, and you have to have language-specific instrumentations. And that's daunting, especially with all of the popular libraries that are out. So for us, it's sort of we contributed back to the libraries that we use heavily, right? We have like a subset of libraries that are very popular at GitHub and sort of blessed, right? So by their popularity. So that's where we focused our energy and our contributions. And then we reached out to people, anytime somebody comes to me and says, hey, I have this challenge with this thing, it's missing this attribute, or I'd really like it to work like this, or I've identified this bug, the first thing I say is, let's open up an issue and let's work on this together. And I'd love to review your PR. And creating an environment that makes it, lowers the barrier to entry to have folks collaborate and submit contributions. I want them to feel like this is yours, this is ours, this is not mine and I'm gatekeeping. Right? We still have some standards for quality, obviously, and some expectations from you as a maintainer, but we try to make this a painless experience for you, at least in the Ruby community. So that's what the contribution process was like for me in getting involved in the community.
That's awesome. So you started basically joining the SIG meetings as an end user and sharing feedback and then finding information about like how to, you can open, an issue, and then like from there building custom stuff and helping the community, the Ruby SIG to build out more of their components. Okay.
Yeah, certainly. And we're the home for open source, right? So for us, we open sourced, for example, new database drivers in Ruby for MySQL, right? And so we had that instrumentation in-house before all of that became public. And as soon as we released that new driver, I went right to the SIG and said, ta-da, I have a donation for you. And it's we were able to pull that in there. So it's this thing where there's just this spirit of collaboration, right? And this spirit of supporting open source that's important to our mission, right?
Okay, so it sounds like you had a pretty kind of positive experience, it sounds like, from for contributing to Ruby. I'd like to know, do you have any feedback to the SIGs on ways to improve how things work based on your experiences with Ruby and then other SIGs? I know you mentioned also some other components that you've used, but we'll come back to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to thank everybody for their amazing work that they've done, contributing to the collector in particular, because we release our OCB build, our custom build every time a new version of the contrib package rolls out. So every week the Penabot is telling us, or every 2 weeks it's telling us, hey, it's time to upgrade. A new release has rolled out. And we ran into some challenges where we identified some performance issues in the collector. And we worked with the team, provided profiles, provided feedback, showed them our configurations, and they were so responsive to our concerns and They were happy to see that we were able to contribute back just in providing feedback, just giving them actual data of production workloads, which is very difficult to do, right? As a maintainer, it's really hard for me to know, hey, what's going on in your in this customer's deployment or this user's deployment. We can't replicate it in our own environment. So that spirit of collaboration was really great, and that's the thing that I'd like to see happen in all the other SIGs. I have limited experience with other SIGs. The other part was contributing to SemConf. And I contributed to SemConf trying to introduce some new attributes. But there's just so much churn in that repository that it was hard for me to keep up with changes and deprecations, right? And so that was a little bit on me to be able to keep up and find out that the stuff I had submitted was deprecated, for example, in favor of something else. But it's those kinds of challenges that it's like I have to find a better way for us to all be able to keep up with each other. So one suggestion I might say is, hey, look, a change happened. Here's an OTAP. A change happened in the spec. That should automatically open issues for every maintainer repo and say, here's a new thing that has changed. This is a new a feature we expect that the SDK should support. And that way we're able to track it, because right now the way it works is, hey, we have somebody who's a representative at the SIG spec. They collect some data, they come back to us, and they tell us, hey, we need to implement this other thing. And sometimes, we're not diligent about project management, right? We're ICs who are doing this in our spare time, right? So we don't. We need to improve, I think, as overall at being able to keep each other informed and tracking work.
Got it. So making sure everyone's on the same page at the same time, which I can see obviously is a bit of a.
It's daunting, yeah.
So I know you mentioned some of the SIGs that you have worked with in the past. What would you say are the SIGs you interact with most right now?
Mm-hmm. Right now, I almost exclusively participate in the Ruby SIG. I don't have a lot of interaction with other SIGs at the moment, other than through an occasional issue or a discussion that'll pop up, or in Slack. I'll jump into a channel and say, hey, I've run into this problem. Or hey, I have this question for y'all. Could you help me? And so I have limited interactions now these days with other SIGs. And just recently, meeting the end user SIG at KubeCon. So I'm going to probably get more involved in the end user SIG now that I have this special invitation from you. So.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. And actually, this brings us to our turn the table section where you get to ask me or anyone on the call questions, and we'll see if I can answer them or if anyone else can answer them.
Okay, so for me, Reese, it's like that's how I got involved. But maybe a special sort of formula or the best way to have someone who's new get involved, in particular in the end user SIG, to provide feedback, or how do they get involved in other SIGs that you've been involved in?
Oh, for sure. So there's a lot of different ways to contribute, right? I think a lot of people, for them, when they think contribute, they think it means, oh, I got to open PRs, I got to be writing code. And that's not necessarily the case. There's so many different ways you can provide feedback. And, like one of the ways you mentioned was you just started out by going to a SIG meeting and sharing some stuff that you were seeing. That is an absolutely great way to contribute to the project. And that's what the End User SIG is all about. Well, one of the things we're all about is gathering feedback to give back to the appropriate SIGs so we can help improve things. So to that end, we do things like surveys, OpenTelemetry Q&A, interview sessions, where we kind of dive deeper into the adoption implementation process and find out your pain points and specific feedback. You can contribute blogs. Maybe you love writing. Documentation is a great way. And probably, if you are not already a part of CNCF Slack instance, I would join. And I just realized that I did not include that link, but we will have it in the show notes. And you can, once you are a member of the CNC of Slack instance, you can scan this QR code and join the OTel SIG end user channel, and we will be
Mm-hmm.
happy to direct you if you have questions about, your implementation, or you just kind of want to know, hey, where do I get started? I'm trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
XYZ. We are happy to help direct you. And we currently have a survey going, which I also just realized I did not share the link. I'm so sorry. I'm going to see if I can get that right now, Henrik.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. So yes, join the SIG meetings. Where can they access the calendar? It's through the
The community repository has links to the calendar.
perfect. Yes. So if there's like a specific language that you are already working in, check out the calendar to find out when the SIG meets, and just hop on. And, when I first started, I was like, I'm just going to check out, a few different SIGs. I went to the Python SIG, and everyone there was so welcoming and so nice. I was just like, I was so intimidated at first. And then I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, wow, these people are so lovely. And that's been my experience with like almost, yeah, I mean, not almost, but every SIG meeting that I've jumped into is
Mm-hmm.
everyone is so open to answering questions, and they want your help. They want to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think one of the things is just letting people know that it doesn't have to be contributions. Of course, if that's what you want to do and are able
Mm-hmm.
to, we would love that. But there's so many other different ways:
Yeah.
feedback, documentation, blogs, doing interviews, surveys, and yeah.
So, similar related to that is like, you're saying that, hey, you can contribute in all these other ways. What kind of expectations of commitment do you have from folks who want to participate? Like, um, do they have to show up to every single meeting? Do they have to constantly be reviewing PRs? Do they have to review, issues? If they miss a meeting, are they like kicked out of the group, never to be invited again?
Got it. I think so. For the end user SIG specifically, we're a pretty small group right now. So we are always happy to, if anyone wants to hop in, and if you're an end user and you're like, yeah, I have some stories to share, perfect. Please reach out to us in the SIG channel. We would love to work with you to get something scheduled and talk to you a little bit
Mm-hmm.
further.
Mm-hmm.
And as for the expectation commitments that you asked about, I I mean, I would hope that you could, join at least one SIG meeting a month, just
Mm-hmm.
so we can, connect virtually. But even if you have a hard time making the SIG meeting because of like other commitments or time zone,
Mm-hmm.
Slack is a great place to get in touch with us. We are totally happy to converse async over Slack. So don't worry about, if you can't make the meetings um, or every meeting. And as far as what's needed, I think it just depends on the priorities of each individual SIG. Um, for us right now, it's really just we're working out we're working on building out our YouTube channel, for instance.
Yeah.
We are still working on building out some of the end user resources we have available, which
Yeah.
there is a link to here, that you can scan to learn more about some of the events that we do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, time commitment wise, we have some contributors that hop on as they can. So we'll maybe see them like, a few times a quarter. And honestly, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need someone to be, of course it would be great, but if you have obviously your day job, is taking up most of your time, like we completely understand. We would just love to see you come in as you can. So don't worry about having to, yeah, get a certain number of PRs each month, or hit a certain number of meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like every little bit counts, right? Every little bit helps. So if you
Oh,
find
absolutely.
yourself interested in trying to contribute back, or you don't know where to get started, or you feel just like intimidated, just know that all of us, we do our best to make the most welcoming communities possible in our SIGs. And I love that the end user SIG creates these opportunities for folks to come and just provide feedback, a space for them to say like, hey, I'm having trouble with this, or I like this, or this was a great experience for me. This part has been very enjoyable for me to be able to share my personal experience and my team's experience with you. So I really hope that folks who are watching at home, hey, come on in. The water's fine. Don't worry.
And we have, if you don't know how to swim, we have buoys, we have floaties, we got all kinds of gear.
Yeah, to help you get started, right? So it's just it's the little things. Every little contribution can help us.
Oh, absolutely.
If your contribution is there to help you, it'll help out the community. So please come on in.
100%. If you're having trouble, a specific problem, I guarantee you at least a dozen other people are having the same problem. If you don't understand something, guarantee you probably at least 100 other people don't understand it either. So
For
yeah.
sure, for sure. So I really appreciate you answering my questions here.
Oh, you are so welcome. And I guess I kind of puts us at right about time. In case anyone has any last minute questions, we'll hang out here for another minute and just kind of chit chat and give people an opportunity to share if they would like. Otherwise, I will just ask about any fun Christmas/New Year plans.
Yeah, we're going to be just spending it with family, so that's going to be really nice. And we're going to be traveling, so that might be a little bit hectic. We have
Where
to
are you going?
travel. We're going to go visit my father-in-law, but we are traveling on Christmas Eve, so that should be fun, right? I'm going to show up there, and we'll be seeing Puerto Rican Christmas carols at the top of our lungs and waking up the neighbors as soon as we arrive. So totally fine for me, you know.
Oh my gosh.
How about
What?
yourself?
Whoa. What are
Yeah.
these Puerto Rican Christmas songs and where can I listen to them?
Oh, okay. You can look at them on YouTube, on TikTok. They're all over the place, but they're in Puerto Rico. You know, folks and in other Caribbean islands, folks will join and make something called a trulla and have a paranda, which is a party basically, and it's like a calamari ball. So you go from house to house knocking on doors. And then you start singing these songs, and the songs are like, "Hey, open up the door. I'm here to say hello. Oh, you turned the lights on. I can see you in there. Let me in." And then you know you have to feed the guests and give them beverages and stuff. And then what you do is you take those people whose home you invaded. We call it an asalto, which is like we show up and we I don't want to. The direct translation is more like you've been stuck. We're sticking you up. We're holding you up. But we break into your home and then we bring you and add you to the katamari ball. And we move to the next house and we come and we'll sing and stuff like that. So it's really great. It's a lot of fun, and so we're looking forward to doing that with our family.
That sounds so fun. What is that? What did you say that was called?
There's it's a couple of words: the trulla, the parranda, aguinaldos. Those are the songs that we will sing, and the asalto, like we're showing up uninvited.
That's so funny. Oh, that's lovely. Honestly, that sounds fantastic.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
I'm so excited. You have to share pictures.
I will, thank you. And maybe videos too. Who knows? I don't know what kind of trouble we can get ourselves into.
Yes. Oh, I would love to have a video of you singing one of these
Uh,
songs.
there are videos of me on the internet singing songs, but not aguinaldos. Now, Reese, what are you going to be doing this holiday season?
I am going to be at home busting out hopefully a bunch of house projects that have been on my to-do list for 3 years.
Nothing like it, right? You're gonna get to the tail sampling project, right? That you want.
Oh my gosh, I have so many tail sampling. Yeah, but I'm really excited about it because I moved into this house about 3 years ago, and it's like 85% there. There's still art. Just don't look in the cabinets. That's a project. Is I need to organize all the inside stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing I tell people all the time. It's like, hey, don't look on the inside of the repositories. You know, you may not know, you may not like how the way things are arranged, but I know where things are, so that's totally fine.
Well, all right. Thank you so much, Aria. You were a fantastic guest. I'm really excited to learn more. As I said, I did have some follow-up questions, so I'm sure I'll be slacking you to learn more, even more about some of your adoption processes, as well as some of the other components you mentioned you had used, such as the OCB. But yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to either of us, you can find us on in CNCF Slack's OTel SIG end user channel. Again, this link is up here for you to scan, and I believe we will have the information in the show notes as well, which will be posted, I think, right after this. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all again next time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me again, Reese. This was really awesome. Thanks everybody for watching wherever you are and whenever you are. And I hope to see y'all in a SIG room sometime.
Oh yes, and happy everything to everyone.
Adios.